Hey, greetings, folks. Welcome to my game room again. Hey, this right here is my copy of a biography of Milton Bradley. You probably heard of him. I think some people think it's two people, like Mr. Milton and Mr. Bradley, that got together and started a company. But it's one guy, Milton Bradley. Now, this video is not a biography of Milton Bradley. That would take a long time. But I want to give you a little bit of background that led up to the creation of his very first board game. He was a New Englander back in the early 1800s. The family kind of moved from place to place throughout New England until he reached the age of majority, and he decided that he wanted to be a draftsman. So he got a job in a patent office and doing drawings for people. There was a financial crisis, and a lot of people were let go, including Milton. And he said, well, this is my opportunity to break out on my own. And so he started his own shop where he offered technical drawing skills, as well as lithographic printing. Well, now, Milton had been introduced to board games. He liked board games. He liked education in general. He could see the connection with games as a means to teach. And it goes way back to games such as the Mansion of Happiness. Now, the Mansion of Happiness was a game that originated in England, and in the 1840s it was being published by the Ives Company in Salem, Massachusetts. He liked the game, but he thought there was weaknesses in it, in that the players didn't have a lot of choice. It was strictly a roll and move. So he said, I think I can do better. So he spent a lot of time working on his idea for a new board game. Now let's take a short side trip and head off to India for just a minute. There's a game there that had been played for many, many generations. It was called Gyan Chapur. And you may recognize the game board here. It looks very, very much like Snakes and Ladders. And in fact, it did eventually become Snakes and Ladders. Today it's called Chutes and Ladders. I guess snakes were kind of scary. But there's a lot of variations on it. And each space on that board had a specific meaning, a specific value, I think is more important. And as the game was played, you would learn that some of these values are advantageous and some not so much. And that educational aspect is really what clicked with Milton when he decided to put together his game. And so what he created was this. This is a reproduction of a board from his first board game called the Checkered Game of Life. And it really looks like a checkerboard, but that wasn't really what he meant by checkered. What he meant was a life that is varied with positives and negatives. A checkered game of life. It's very similar to these other games that you roll and move, and there was rewards and hazards along the way. But the biggest difference with his game is that you had choices to make. He used a teetotum because dice were looked upon as sinful, wicked things that led to gambling and debauchery and so on. And you would spin that teetotum, and then whatever number came up on the top here, I've got a 2, the 2 would then be looked up on your little cheat sheet here. Now, this is just a quick reproduction of that cheat sheet. Here's a picture of what it actually looked like back in the day. Here is the player aid, we would call it today, that says if you roll a 1, you go 1 square up or down. Now, I usually don't say up or down, but the board actually says top and bottom on it so that you can know which direction you're talking about. You roll a 2, you go right and left. You go a 3, then you can go diagonally in any direction. A 4, 1 or 2 squares up or down. A 5 is 1 or 2 squares right and left. A 6 is 1 or 2 squares diagonally. And so you had choices about where you wanted to go and what repercussions might occur within that restriction. So that was sort of an innovation for this type of a game. You could wander around the board and encounter a lot of different challenges and so on. Let me just review what some of these squares do and mean. All player pawns enter the board at infancy. And along the bottom of the board are bad spaces. Disgrace, jail, and prison are at the bottom of the social ladder. On the next rank is school. Landing here, a pawn moves immediately to college. That's pretty amazing. Landing at influence moves a player immediately to the oddly named fat office, a place of success in business, I presume. Fame, though, is somehow inconsequential. In the third rank, poverty is not good, but escapable. Ambition leads immediately to fame, again, of little consequence. College, though, earns the player 5 points. Avoid suicide at all costs, for landing here ejects you from the game entirely. Honesty, industry, and bravery all move upwards towards a higher score. Ruin, although escapable, is far from wealth. Without further detail, you can see the way these spaces interact across the board. Now, the objective of the game is not to reach a happy old age in the corner of the board. The objective is to earn 100 points. And those points are tracked on the little scorecard here. So when you reach 100 points, you have won the game. You can obviously gain 50 points if you can make it all the way to happy old age, but you can also wander about the board and collect points as you go. There's a few spaces that are a little strange. There's a few spaces that changed over the evolution of the game as Milton got some feedback from players saying, why is this, and whatever. But it's a very insightful game as far as the period from which it came and the morality tales. But one thing that sets this apart from those English goose games and morality games like the Mansion of Happiness is it's quite American. The winning condition is not so much virtuous or righteous, it's more success in American terms. Business factors into this quite a bit. And Milton knew that. Milton knew that he had something on his hands. It started to sell like wildfire. He went to New York City with 100 copies under his arm, and he sold them out almost immediately. At the end of the first full year of production, which was 1861, he sold over 45,000 copies of the game. He packaged the game, especially for soldiers during the Civil War, and of course that spread the popularity of the game even further. And this was the mainstay product for the Milton Bradley Company for almost a century. Now here's a photo of some people in the 1930s enjoying a game. You can see that they replaced the teetotum with a spinner and several other innovations. The most recent edition I could find was this one, gaudy full color. I don't even know information about this particular edition, but it's definitely a more modern incarnation of the game. Now the Checkered Game of Life, it's still a lot of fun to play when we have gatherings of the Historical Society to talk about. Here was a game that was extremely popular during the latter half of the Victorian era. As I say, it gives you insight into the values and virtues that people treasured back then. Now Mr. Bradley, he stayed at the helm of his company until his death in 1911. But everybody's familiar with the MB logo, and everybody has a copy of Battleship or Twister or one of those Milton Bradley standards. You look here behind me, you see the Game of Life. This is completely unrelated to the Checkered Game of Life. It's still a Milton Bradley product that was developed in the 1960s. Now they redesigned the Game of Life for the 21st century. Unfortunately, I don't think the newer version is anywhere near as much fun or as much of a challenge as the original Game of Life. So Hasbro has taken over Milton Bradley some years ago, and they've completely phased out the MB as a logo, except for the legacy value of Milton Bradley. But for well over 150 years, he was one of the major players, if not the major player, in the game world. So we don't play the Checkered Game of Life anymore, but we still play the Checkered Game of Life, n'est-ce pas? Whatever you play, though, I hope that you will keep watching our channel here and subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to click the notification bell and we'll get you more information on games and how to play them. And be sure to share with me your comments or your questions or suggestions. Check all the links here in the show notes, and I will remind you once again, as I always do, be sure to play every day.